Welcome to the first session of 10 Speed Sessions, a new podcast that we've developed. We have had the Content That Grows podcast for several years, did almost 70 episodes, and really just felt like it kind of hit the end of its natural life. And some of the things, from our experience in doing that, things that we found is like doing very short form episodes and trying to do evergreen topics. We've found, as you know, like things have changed so much that like having a deep library of content doesn't necessarily mean that it stays relevant. Even if we try to do the evergreen content. And so that's been challenging. And, there's a lot of companies that do like the ABM style approach to, oh, we're just going to invite guests that are target companies we want to work with. We never really got in with that. So our guests were always just trying to be like people we thought would be adding value. For anyone who's done that and knows it's a lot of work, it's a lot to coordinate and just challenging. And so what we've really found is like anytime Kevin and I get together, we have great conversations. We talk about what's going on in our business. We talk about what's going on with clients, and felt like this is a much better format. It's just like sit down, have a longer conversation.
Bit more authentic.
Very much, yes. And it's Kevin's, back in Chicago now, so we're excited to be in person, in studio, in Chicago, be able to sit down and have some of these longer conversations. And so really the goal is talk about things that are, we're not trying to break news and talk about something that just happened yesterday, but talk about what we know is actually going on right now for marketers in the world of B2B marketing, and just in general, kind of how things are evolving to stay on top of it. And then the bonus side of that is, with this and kind of following along, you get some of the perspective of our view across, dozens of clients, and being able to see patterns and some of those things there too. So
Yep.
that's really the goal with the show. But yeah, we'll be doing that moving forward.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what we can actually take from those client conversations to inform these and pair it up with everything that's going on. I think it'll be helpful for not only our clients, but yeah, just anybody who's interested in the topics that are relevant to the things that we do.
Yep. So the main topic today is we're going to be talking about like AEO, answer engine optimization. But we do have an agenda with quite a few other things. And being in Chicago and kind of founded here, wanted to also just kind of talk a bit today about Chicago tech scene specifically. So I won't go over like the entire agenda, but got quite a bit to cover. So excited to do that.
Don't bury the lead on AEO, GEO, LLMO.
Yeah.
That's all the same thing.
Yes. Well, yeah. Why don't you go ahead and just kick that off and we'll start.
Yeah, I mean, the hot new thing, not hot new, because AEO stands for Answer Engine Optimization. I mean, if you even Google it, or I guess in a meta way, just search it on an LLM or something, a chatbot, it's been around for a while. There's a ton of information and news around that for a handful of years now. It's resurfaced recently, I think is maybe the one leading the acronym war when it comes to that. But AEO, generative engine optimization, large language model optimization, anything that basically talks about how you get surfaced in, the chat GPTs, their perplexities and all of that stuff of the world. Yeah, I mean, it's super hot topic, and I mean, there's a lot of things we can discuss around it, but that's just generally the top level. Where do you want to start?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say I did pull some stats prior to this, and it's interesting seeing the volume. So obviously like the usage of all of those platforms, Perplexity and whatnot, is growing rapidly, and eating into a lot of that search volume, but it is still like, as of very recently, the report I read said that it was like Google still has 14x the volume essentially. So it's not, one thing I saw kind of summarizing it was like saying, it's not just like a science project anymore. Like the market share owned by these is material, but it is still like a huge difference there.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger marker is like that it is increased engagement. So like session times and like the depth in which people are going. So one session in, Perplexity or ChatGPT can be the equivalent of, multiple search sessions, and typically is like, the way you're conversing and going back and forth. So
Yeah.
so I think that's interesting, but from the perspective, so we just our most recent newsletter just came out, and I talked about this with AEO, and I think the biggest thing is like we didn't have this until recently, so like everyone sort of converged on this thought at the same time around like there's a lot of this that is just still SEO because
It is.
yeah, like even just 2 years ago, I think like maybe you could do the plugin to do search on ChatGPT, but like everything was saying like, oh, this model is only updated through 2021. And so it was, it was like, sure, you can go find informational queries or historical facts or those types of things, but it wasn't super relevant. And so really it just in the last, year and a half, 2 years, where like search became a much bigger part of it, that's when we've been able to start to dissect and figure out how is it actually surfacing that. And so I think that's why this is all bubbling up and becoming the talking point right now is because of that. From a timeline perspective, but I think, I know you have some details on it, like the PR aspect and like brand becoming bigger part of it, I think is super interesting and something that we're definitely seeing.
Yeah, I think it's also important to contextualize it within like the conversations we have all the time around it, which is very isolated to specific types of conversations and queries that people are having with them, which is always something around a variation of the high intent queries that we've become accustomed to defining as lower down the funnel, where someone's maybe interacting. If traditionally it was in search, it would be like, what is the best X software for this? That longer question or query is being input into ChatGPT or Perplexity in a variety of different ways that are like way more dynamic, I think, than they've ever been. And that's where the brand play comes into it. Because if you start to like think about all the other ways that people are talking to a chatbot and then a brand gets surfaced, it could be so dynamic. So I think though, ultimately it is a brand play and how you're perceived across the internet and where you're being cited as a like authority or I guess there's positive sentiment around your brand and product. But that's, I think, one of the bigger things is that we're trying to talk with a lot of clients, and also just like the way you read about it online is just, brand is a big influencer there.
Yeah. What do you think about the, one of the aspects is like unlinked brand mentions, being more material. So I was thinking about that as it like, our name is 10Speed. Like, do you think that that's going to start to shift? Kind of like when people used to do like exact match domains. Do you think anyone who's founding a company right now starts to become like
obsessed with
maybe
that?
Going back to like the intentional misspellings and extra vowels and like some of those things that maybe like have some of that ability to get the unlinked brand mention stuff?
Yeah, it's going to inform a bunch of different like probably misguided tactics that like it's almost like we're going backwards to some extent.
Yeah.
When it's just like if you were ever trying to get your product's visibility raised and people know about you, like you do better PR or you would, create great content, and that all happens naturally. It's not, I've been using it lately, the whole like if you build it, they will come type thing. But like that is kind of true to some extent when it comes to like do the things that are authentic to your brand, and then those things will play out. Obviously PR and brand plays are bigger and a little bit more strategic and proactive versus just like hoping you get mentioned. But still, like at the end of the day, if you're controlling how your brand is
Yep.
spelled or this and that, like
Yep.
it's gonna,
Yep.
I don't know, snowball into something weird.
Yeah. So going back to, you were talking about like, you mentioned an example of like best software for X, or, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. The thing that I think is interesting is like, you're right, the query does change a lot. And, for example, now that might be, what is the best software for a 25-person company who runs on HubSpot and Gusto, and we need to make sure we have bidirectional sync for this, and that it integrates with this, and that it does this, which is an extremely different type of query. And then obviously the LLM can process that, but it does bring to mind like review sites, becoming a really critical piece of like the data that they're being trained on, which, G2 and Trust Radius and those, like, they tend to have reviews that do talk about that, like, this is really great. Here's the strong points. Here's the weak points. Any of that, but also people that do talk about more advanced use cases or integration or those types of things. Like, maybe talk a little bit about what our team's been doing on that front, and like understanding the impact of reviews on.
Oh yeah. I mean, review content can inform, it all goes back to the content that you create. So it just, we advise and build strategies around, or at least make recommendations, because, sometimes the in-house team is obviously best suited to create more technical documentation, or, help support center content, like that type of stuff.
Yep.
Help center. I think the review sites can help inform that content a lot. Yep. And then it can also inform just ultimately like what you need to create to combat some of the negativity, right? Like if people are criticizing X feature, or this, it doesn't do that, like that can be addressed through a piece of content, right? That you can produce, and that can be fed back into ultimately what the model gets trained on. And then over time, that's going to end up becoming something that hopefully creates a positive sentiment.
Yep.
But I think it's like, it's no different than what I think any company should be doing when it comes to like looking at reviews as a source of getting feedback to improve the things that they're doing as a business.
Yep.
But just layered on top of the marketing team and the content team, right? Like they're just the ones looking at that, and that's one aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you do address those through content and the product doesn't satisfy that, then that's a bigger issue.
Yes. Which I think leads me to probably my favorite part of all this. And I, mentioned this as well in that newsletter, which check it out, newsletter.10speed.io. It's on Substack. And it is all just leading in a really positive direction, which is like, you just have to be good at marketing, and you have to be good at product, and you have to run your business well. Like,
yes.
It is leading towards, or it is leading away from these people who can just build some sort of hacky growth loop and, try to bury bad reviews or whatever. And like, many companies that like, they have great marketing, but the product is just okay. The business is run poorly, like all that stuff. Like that is part of what we are seeing, is like, hey, this hasn't, like, your content's good, or like there's some small changes we can make. We can create a help center article, but like, you have very negative reviews on your mobile app. You have terrible, whatever, like it can even just be like Glassdoor stuff or whatever. Like,
right.
There's no hiding from being bad at this stuff. And it's like,
right.
I think it is very exciting and very positive. Like, let the people who are actually doing well across the board succeed, and not favoring those who can figure out how to hack the system. And so
Totally.
I think that's leading to really good conversations with clients too, like just around brand and product and all that stuff. Like it's a really, really solid thing.
I think it's actually, it's exciting if you think about it, all of the brand and PR teams and people we've worked with, I think are like really getting their due, because, like it is going to have a really impactful, it's going to be impactful to that visibility and those things that are becoming more and more important. But I think it just levels the playing field, that it's not just like, now it's not just SEO, it's these other things. It's everything. It just enforces that it's got to be a holistic like effort across all marketing functions.
Yep.
And then the product and the business. And it can't just be this one thing. Yep. SEO, especially for so long, it had been this thing where it's like, that's the silver bullet. Like, as long as we just like hammer out a ton of content and get it indexed and really strategic and build great content, like that's good. But if it doesn't lead back to something great, then it's going to end up being a challenge in the long run.
And it's, I'm in no way going to claim that I ever saw all of this coming, but like, I will say for a long time on our old podcast, we talked about organic search is just one distribution channel.
Right.
So 2015, 10 years ago, we had a ton of people that could succeed and just basically have paid search and organic search and crushed it with that. And we were seeing that divergence, and even for ourselves, but also for a lot of clients, like the difference between just focusing on organic search versus that being paired with social media efforts and a podcast and a strong newsletter and building authority around like CEO or leading figures in the company. And that's why we've really driven towards organic growth in the last couple of years. And so I think that there's a lot there that does set up well now for at least where this is at now. Who knows how it continues to evolve, but so many of those signals matter, around authority that can be deciphered in more ways than just backlinks, or domain rating like it was in the past. Like there's a lot of that, like we mentioned before, unlinked brand mentions. You're right, PR people are finally getting their due and all of that, and I think product marketers too. I think that's a huge area around like positioning.
Product marketing is going to be big,
and differentiation and all that. So
on that, the one other thing that I had noted out in thinking through this was like just how some of the articles I've been reading, but also just what we've been seeing when it comes to what comes up when, we get asked the question. We've been doing a lot of research when someone asks us like, why aren't we showing up here, or why are we showing up here when it's the same ideas, like why aren't we ranking number one in the, is the different content types, which is also something that, should be thought about in general, but meaning like not just blog posts, it should be like, resourceful guides or more technical documentation, like I said, like on a support center, but then also core pages and pricing pages and all those things. So that's where product marketing is going to come back into play, where like you can't just slap together like a little website with like very vague, generic content. You need to have like strong product marketing. And, probably this day and age is going to end up ironically being helped and aided probably by some AI informing that copywriting. But if you have a strong product marketer, like anybody using these tools, they're going to get something great out of it. And then it's going to turn into a great holistic, down funnel play for a product. But that'll ultimately be seen, because to put a pin on it, most times when we're looking at and researching some of those lower funnel high intent queries within a LLM or ChatGPT, most often it's a product page, like a core marketing page. Mm-hmm. It's not a listicle. Like you don't go like, hey, best X, and then it lists like,
correct.
It's always just like or a homepage, right? So like anything that's coming back into play where it's not just the educational content, doesn't de-emphasize the importance of that content. That all plays together, and you got to be strategic about it. But that's interesting to see that becoming even a bigger thing now, which just means people got to put forth more effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I want to talk too about like the first party data
Hmm.
side of this, because I do think that's something we've pushed for a lot, with clients and research reports and anything we can do, like just in general, you take AI out of it completely, like the the way that can just like say you do one survey, create one research report, the number of ways that you can fuel different types of marketing across different channels. You can start to insert your own first party stats into blog posts you already have. Like it can go so many directions and give so much life to your company. But now in addition to that, like that is certainly becoming a bigger thing in terms of being cited
Right.
in AI, and having that is so I think the LLMs surfacing that is important. But then again, just kind of comes back to credibility and whatnot. And so I think that's another really big area that is going to matter for all of this.
Yeah. I mean, still brings it back to the fundamentals of like good SEO to some extent, but first party data informs potentially getting cited, which ultimately is backlink building, which is also then domain authority building and all the things that have historically been positive signals that haven't really changed. So like it shouldn't mean that you should change it or change your motion. It just means you should again get more be more intentional and like intentional, thoughtful, but also just like I'll put forth a lot more effort into creating something great with first party data that attracts natural attention, but
Hmm.
then also enables the PR and brand to bring it back to that, to
Yeah.
be able to pitch really good stuff.
Yep.
And then I'm not as well versed right now on like where social it plays into all of this, because I know that there are signals that people debate when it comes to like, whether LinkedIn and all that. But either way, that's an engine that just feeds more visibility, that can feed more natural citations and stuff on
Yep.
on websites and
Yep.
and all that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to it, and it's really just fascinating too. Like, um, as as far as we've come on data science and everything in like, I mean, that's probably been in the mainstream for what, 7 or 8 years now. Like we still see so many companies that just don't even have like the right like data infrastructure
Right.
to even be able to pull, like they have so much data flowing through their platform or product or
Hmm.
service or whatever, and they just can't even pull
Yeah.
that data. So I think there's even some of that that's like, if this is really going to become a far more material thing, then I think some of that even just starts at the ground level of how
Totally.
like everything's structured so that you can actually easily pull all that data.
And that's gonna be the most important way to get that owned data. I think like if we're like being like not prescriptive, but like giving like advice on it, but you can get data too if that's not the case. The reality is that a lot of businesses, especially startups, they might not get that set up the right way, which they should, but like, things go a specific way and then maybe put someone else in place to clean that up and whatever. But the whole point is that like you can end up having first party data, quote unquote, by, doing surveys and things
Yeah.
like that and
Yep.
collecting data around what you're doing, and then packaging it in a way that's, interesting. Like it's kind of no similar than working with like a Gartner or someone who
Hmm.
you would be working with to put together something where they own the data and then you're just crafting a narrative around it, but it's well thought out, researched, et cetera. And that's still important.
Yep.
But now I think people can do that stuff without having to necessarily pay to play for the big ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I think the biggest thing that we got to make sure we talk about is probably probably should have started with this. Like the thing that's probably affecting people the most and causing the most stress right now is how to manage how to manage expectations,
Yeah.
how the heck to find, the horizon and get equilibrium and know how to make decisions on their data, uh, because everything's very much up in the air. So I think that's definitely something we gotta
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah, and I think there's a few ways to do it. It is a big challenge. I'm not gonna like ignore that. When historically no company, especially in like the Google age, has ever really been like, I'm totally cool with my traffic not going up into the right exponentially all the time, right? Like that's the whole point of this, right? We're investing in this, we got to see that. And but like not 9 times out of 10, but like we'll see commonly that like most of the time that's not even the right traffic. That was already happening. So I think if we can continue to refine the way we not only educate and manage up, but look for the signals within the actual data down funnel that show that that's not as important, which we do see. Sometimes you got to work this goes back to even having a good marketing foundation for your data, right? Attribution is understood and all of that. But then you can start to, I think, point to the right things. There are plenty of examples out there, like industry colleagues of ours that talk about even working with clients and things like that, or working with companies where they're like, no, we're putting together stories based off of like strong MQL growth or this and that, and traffic isn't like skyrocketing. So that the ability to have that conversation is there. It's just, I think you have to find the data. If you don't have the lower funnel conversion data, then that's a whole other thing. But
Totally.
That's probably the best way to even approach it. But yeah, I think we're in a new world of like resetting expectations on what traffic looks like, especially as these LLMs and AI overviews and Google and all that eat into click-through rates.
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely think if you're really feeling like everything's up in the air, I think the number one thing I would say is make sure you have like the lower funnel conversion stuff in a good place. Like that is ultimately the most important part. So if you don't have that, stop trying to figure out
right
how much traffic did we have and what do we have. Like get that that should always be the focus anyway. Like if you're coming into a company and you don't have conversion, like you should be trying to get that set up. But that is going to be the biggest thing, because you're right. Like we are going to see that. We've seen that for clients where we've pruned, dozens, if not hundreds of pages or, posts or whatever that were relevant, and they lost some traffic from those, and it had zero impact on that. And then it ultimately had some positive impacts on other parts. Like there are scenarios, and I understand, if I were, a board member or something, seeing that, like that story does work. Like we are getting less traffic, but we're not losing conversions. 100%. But at some point there is you can only squeeze so much, so like at some point that's fine, but like where, like helping figure out where is that threshold that once we cross this, like we probably will start losing, some of those. And so I think, again, the main thing is like you have to understand the conversion, lower funnel. Maybe that, if you're much more sales led, like, qualified opportunities or whatever it might be. However you're handling that, like some of those down funnel metrics, to just have a really good pulse on that, because the traffic aspect of it is going to be wild. We have seen, for some clients where like the net aggregate is flat or even up a little bit when you do factor in the traffic they're getting from LLMs. Like, so seeing that in combination, then you can kind of see like, oh, okay, it's just some of this is shifted, or it's even like increased in some ways. But generally I think that's going to be the answer for a while, is like not getting too worked up, because it's literally happening across the board.
Yes.
For every website, for every company. And you have to focus on the things that are material and matter for your business, and go from there.
Totally. And I think that's the most extreme thing you can do, probably, to make sure and safeguard against that, and if you're already experiencing like a lot of traffic loss because of LLMs and AIOs and all that, it's because of that. I mean, it was already pretty discussed online, but like HubSpot lost all their a massive amount of traffic, whatever, 6 months ago, right? Because of this, right? And I'm not the person who pointed it out. There's plenty of people who did, but like the conversation evolved into, if you looked at what they lost, it was all this like top of funnel traffic that was like content that they've created, which built their program, that doesn't matter really to their business and doesn't matter to the audience.
Yeah.
So I think like if you are starting now to create content for your website, and even if you have legacy content, I think it's either you make sure that whatever you're building is like incredibly relevant. It's also going to because it's going to safeguard against too, like your sales team, right? Like if you know that this answers or maps to something that like your audience and your user is like in tune to, or it solves a problem for, and then you get a lead, and you're probably going to prevent like a sales leader coming and being like, why did we create this piece of content, which is going to happen no matter what. And then also over time, when your traffic does start to decay, if you're focused on those things that like truly matter, then you're going to be able to like actually speak to like, this is how we fix it because these are important. We need to update this content or whatever. But I think that that's going to be really important. And then like the days of building all of this top of funnel traffic content isn't going to matter anymore. Maybe it's important to build like a really good long form comprehensive piece on like the thing that 5 things that are important to your business, right? That's still going to be valuable to some extent, but even then it's still going to probably need to be like super, super like narrow in how you're talking about it to some extent. But either way, those days I think are gone of building authority off of like, hey, let's just cover everything around the sun around these things.
Yeah. And building skyscrapers.
Skyscrapers.
All Brian Dean's skyscrapers being torn down right now.
Yeah.
I think HubSpot was a good example. And to me, what comes to mind is like probably, again, in a very healthy way, if you think about it from like a TAM perspective, like maybe your topical content TAM is just smaller.
Right.
So like we used to talk about this at Sprout, where it'd be like, okay, here's this bullseye, or the center is like stuff that is directly tied to our product.
Yep.
And then one ring out is like, here's all the things we want to create content around. And then you get into like tertiary, you're starting to get into some more fringe things that like indirectly relate or like are just applicable to your ICP, but not necessarily related to your product. And HubSpot just started so early that they were on like their 9th or 10th, 12th ring, where like, they were many, many years past even like, creating email signature tools and stuff like even that's, I guess, still somewhat related, but like, they did it for so long that they pushed so far out that like, yes, I think everyone looked at that and said, I'm not surprised that you as a software company doing, email and CRM and all this stuff, like that content just lost traffic. Like,
totally.
That totally makes sense. So so maybe from a TAM perspective, they just, as companies go on, like they do maybe reach a point where there's diminishing returns, or it doesn't rank, or it doesn't, perform in any way. So,
agreed.
Yeah. Anything else you want to touch on from the AEO perspective?
I think that's it. There's some like probably more technical stuff we can get into on a later.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be evolving. And
I think those are the big ones on that one.
Yeah. All right. So next on the agenda, I wanted to talk a bit like so we went to SaaStr in the fall, which was cool. Very different from when I went, like in 2016 or something like that. We went to Inbound a couple years ago. And so we've kind of looked at been to some conferences, looked at some of these things, and I think what's really interesting is like the big ones have gotten huge. So like Dreamforce,
Yeah.
I think is probably the biggest. I went to the Marketo conference a long time ago too. That was also a
remember
really
that.
big one. But like Dreamforce, SaaStr, Inbound, and what kind of brought those to mind a little bit was like when we went to Inbound, it conflicted with SaaStr. The dates conflicted.
Oh yeah.
And then they moved it this year, which was really weird. Like we were just there in the fall and they did not even say anything
Yeah.
about it being in May, the following May. Like I just thought that was really weird and jarring.
Yeah.
Um,
They didn't say they haven't announced why they moved it up or anything, huh?
I couldn't find anything on that. No.
Yeah.
But like SaaS stock is, I think it's third or fourth year. So that just happened this week as well.
Austin, right?
In Austin.
Yeah.
But that's now like dividing some of the SaaS crowd,
Yeah.
across two different. So they're literally two conferences with like that their names both start with SAAST.
Yeah.
Like they're very, very similar, that were over the same dates this year. And then there's also like Dave Gerhardt's like Drive
Yep.
conference, which I saw is now application required.
Mm.
And
Yeah, he made a big splash, I think, with that first one.
but a much smaller conference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then same with PEP's
Mhm.
Spring.
Yep.
Which is from his company Winter. Similar. We had looked at that for Ryan to maybe go to. That was a little bit like not entirely, but sort of application only. And so, and then like like Digital
What's
Summit.
application to attend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Digital Summit series, Digital Marcon, or like big multi-city, more tactical. So I think it's really interesting time to like, obviously everyone had to figure everything out again post COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's an interesting time for marketers, and if I try to put myself in the shoes of like if I were 25 again and like trying to soak up as much information as possible and meet people and network, like the big ones are just so big.
Yeah. Almost not
and-
even like focused even on marketing for like Inbound isn't. They wrap everything in like a lens of kind of marketing, but
Yeah.
marketing sales, but
Yeah. Well, and that, yeah. And like the platform specific ones, I also went to Inbound, I think in like 2015
Mhm.
when I was a Sprout, and I was like, it's cool, but like we don't use HubSpot. So like
yeah,
half the sessions or more
right.
weren't like just so specific on how to do it with that tool.
But that's very different today. I feel like they made a big swing back. There's
Yes.
even more
Yes.
normalized HubSpot usage than there was then. I think it was like a lot more. It was split. I feel like.
Yep. Yeah. So it's really interesting in terms of like, for a marketer at a company, like where do you basically get to ask your boss like once or
Yeah.
maybe once every 2 years or something. And then obviously there's like very specific SEO conferences and some of those too, but just talking a bit more generally around marketing and the tech world and stuff like that. Like, it's interesting. And it's also just like, even just thinking about like some of our clients sponsor
Yeah.
or like have booths at events and those types of things. Where to do that? Like, I don't know. It just feels like it's kind of, to me, it just feels like it's all kind of in this weird limbo of like,
Yeah.
what does make sense. Like there's the curated small application only, but that only
There's
allows
like no middle ground.
so many people.
Yeah.
And then I think like SaaS stock is probably like the best example of medium sized.
Yeah.
But obviously for anyone B2B marketing that isn't in SaaS, then like that's not really relevant. And then that kind of leaves you with the other Digital Summit and some of those, which are still quite a bit bigger.
Yep. And more tactical to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting like evolution. It's good to see that there's more in-person stuff, obviously after everything COVID wise shut things down. So it's good to see that there's one, growing interest and demand in not only like big conferences, but these small ones. I mean, we've talked to a lot of clients who are attending a lot of events. Like those are becoming big lead drivers for many, again, which is good. So like, yeah, I don't know. It's tough. If you're like an IC or an individual contributor, I think it makes sense to be able to try and go to some of these, but I don't know how you choose.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what helped me early on in my career was going to, like, I would say, because I went to Link Love and Search Love from, that was distilled, and like partnered with Moz, I believe, I forget, but, and Sear, I don't know, those few early, leaders in that space, and they were smaller. That was in Boston in a smaller little, I think it was on Harvard's campus, but it was great. It was tactical, but future focused and, but the space was so much smaller and there was not many to choose from at that time. I think at the digital summits were around at that time. And these were like the kind of, I think that at that time was kind of like the drives or the winters of the time.
Yeah, they were much smaller.
So if anything, I'd probably say that those are probably ones to seek out if you can get to go to them.
Which ones?
Like the smaller ones, the Dave Gerhardts and all that. But I don't know. I feel like it's a bigger question. I'd question like the inbounds if you're like an individual contributor, someone who's like, I want to go to this, unless you are actively in HubSpot, that might provide the additional value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's obviously like very logical applications for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really interesting, and we've talked about very, very lightly off and on, like if we did a small conference ourselves, in Chicago, like what would that look like, and some of those details, and I think that that's the biggest thing is like from that perspective is you have to do something that's worth people coming to, especially knowing that they are likely having to choose one thing. And so obviously the speakers you can get is big, but like format really matters, venue really matters. Like, I mean, the other thing, like the thing we found at that SaaStr was like the sessions were sort of chaotically timed.
Oh yeah, you're running all over the place.
Where you're like, oh wait, so I can go to this, but halfway through I have to leave to go to this other one, which makes sense. It's so big, like you have multiple stages, but even just syncing some of that up, a little more like being in high school or something and having passing periods.
Yeah,
which again, they probably can't do that. Like you can't. You have so many. I mean, you're like tens of thousands. Like you can't. Necessarily have everyone moving at once, but
totally.
So this is why I don't plan conferences, because it sounds like there's just a lot that is stressful logistical. But from thinking about where we want to attend, where we want our team to be able to attend, where we have a presence, just a lot of that. It definitely feels interesting and up in the air in terms of what there could be.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it'd be great if there were more. Maybe it's a good segue too, but into another topic. But the having them locally curated would be interesting. It's just tough because so many people are dispersed. So I don't know how you do it. So like, it is a bigger investment for people to have to travel. But like back in the 2018, 2019, like Chicago would do tons of locally, like curated events and things like that featured brands and all that. So, I don't know. I'm sure the dust will settle and things will normalize a little bit, but it's tough to see where you'd want to bet on going.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it'll be something to watch and just be interesting. And I do want to just also say, like, obviously from a exhibitor sponsor standpoint, and knowing that, you know, we do have a number of clients where like organic search and conferences are like their two main drivers of pipeline.
And I think it'll grow. It'll continue to grow for events too.
Yeah. So like, obviously this is talking about the marketing world. So in that case, it would really only apply to like a MarTech company. Yeah. So like, if your audience is whatever, like accountants or whatever, like you're going to accounting conferences, and like exhibiting there, like that's very different. And so that I won't even pretend to speak to all the different industries and conferences there, but
it might be an accounting software specific conference.
Yeah. it just feels weird. Like, it feels like it's such a big industry. It feels weird to me that even just for myself, like, to not feel like, oh, this is the one I go to every year, and this is the one that like the people that I want to see are at, and like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, like Dreamforce is sort of that for like like everyone in the Salesforce ecosystem. Like, it's like,
for sure,
this is the one, we go to this. And I just didn't get that feeling from SaaStr.
No, it was all big, broad spectrum.
Yeah. And, you know, so maybe it's a little bit of where we're at, and like being an agency versus SaaS company, I'll totally give that caveat credibility and whatnot. But like, yeah, I think that's kind of how I would distill it, is like, I don't really know if I were to pick one for myself. I don't even know which one I should invest the time to go to.
I agree.
So, but yeah, we'll shift gears real quick. You mentioned Chicago, local stuff. It's really weird. So I got a chance to go to a local event recently. I think you did as well. So that was fun, just to kind of go connect and see some people and stuff. But did really kind of highlight the last two things that I've done have been like, not like the greatest sentiment on like Chicago tech.
Yeah.
You know, through conversations, it just felt like there's a lot there. So I mean, I was looking at like, you know, Techstars in Chicago is different now. Like they kind of like spin up these partnership funds. So like with JP Morgan and with Northwestern Medicine. So like the Northwestern one, they're specifically looking for like healthcare startups.
Right.
Cool idea, but just very different. Like, you're not going to get, you know, a Groupon or a Sprout Social or something out of that. You know, big local news with the 1871 incubator closing its physical doors. So still exists as an organization, and can, you know, incubate and connect and community and all that stuff. But I think just didn't get the momentum back post-COVID. In terms of people being there. And I remember being in that space multiple times.
Same. I saw you speak at that space once.
Super cool.
Or you were on a panel.
I was on a panel, yeah. Yeah, and when I started consulting, did some like advisory stuff, kind of did like rapid fire with a bunch of early stage founders and chatting through that stuff. And so I just remember I came to Chicago in 2011 to join Sprout, went to the 600 West Chicago building. Groupon was there, plus like light bank companies, and like the energy, I think, was just so powerful and like critical to that. And it was just like one exciting thing after another of like,
well, there's like an identity to it, I feel like, that is lost now.
Yeah. And well, I mean, and being remote probably doesn't help to some extent, but like, I don't know. It's just like the ethos is just not there in some cases. And I don't want to discredit anyone who is working hard to foster that, because I can't say that I've done my part to contribute to it, even though we are starting to do more there. But yeah, I just think it felt like there was a ton of momentum, in the teens, like those, 2011 to COVID, or up until COVID. That, I mean, all kinds of just like, hey, a bunch of early stage companies getting together for ping pong tournaments and whatever, like just sort of self planned things as well in the ecosystem, and meeting people, supporting people, like a lot of that stuff. So I miss that energy, and I think the biggest thing has just been like, how do we, like, figuring out how do we get some of that,
tap into it back,
I
was looking, I think the disbursement of employees changed the makeup of that a little bit, but I think it's possible for it to happen again. It looks like Austin, and we know that's why probably SaaStock is there to some extent, but like the number of employees, like they're like apparently the number one, like big tech employee percentage change in headcount since beginning of the pandemic. Seattle was big. I didn't know that was it. So like Chicago's up there. They're in like the top 5 or 10 still, but like it's definitely, I think, gone in a different direction. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know, it'll probably just take time for that to happen again. But I do feel like that there was that kind of, it's like anything that was associated with the Bay Area, which it seems like that's kind of coming back around. I had a note in here too about the tech conferences too. Like Inbound is in San Francisco.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until like a week ago.
This year it's going to be?
Yeah, it's moving. It's the first time it's ever not been in Boston. And I like tried to look. I was like, maybe the convention center or something, or wherever they have it is like being remodeled. I didn't find anything. I was like, there had to be like a logical reason because it was a big thing, but like also maybe it was just like, maybe a lot of people aren't coming there to go to it. It says it'll return in 2026. Who knows? There's probably something out online that said it. I looked at their announcement and everything, but
if they're returning, then that feels, maybe it's temporary,
or maybe they're testing it out and being like, this goes gangbusters.
Dude, Boston, I love flying. Like fly into Boston, go through the tunnel. It's like, it's so easy. It's so fast.
Yep.
For being the size of city it is. Oops, I just
yep.
What was I gonna say? I mean, and not to like fully get into it, but I think that the one thing working against Chicago is when you don't have a strong tech hub and like a reason for people to be here, similar to like a lot of people started to leave the Bay Area. There wasn't like a pulling force. I mean, if I'm like an early stage founder, I am not, and I have a choice between being like paying Illinois taxes and cost of living and everything versus somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because I'm a remote company in any way.
Right.
And there's no like hub that's pulling me and like attracting me to stay, then I think that definitely makes it challenging. So like,
yeah, to some extent, it's not terribly surprising for Austin to be. Austin got popular for many different reasons, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there, and I know there's so many people in the city that have done a lot to foster relationships and work development between, the mayor's office and the governor and all that kind of stuff. But it just kind of does highlight to some extent that there are a lot of things that have to work in tandem to really drive that. But I mean, it's not just that. Like, I feel like 10, 15 years ago, the like New York startup scene was way, way more vibrant. Like, I don't hear a lot coming out of New York anymore. There were a lot of really big incubators there. There were a lot of prominent investors that are certainly still there. But like, I just think the whole space fragmented a little bit, and Chicago's still trying to find find its way. So I fully trust that the folks running 1871 explored this in depth far more than I have, and have tried a lot to make it work. So I'm not discounting any of that. But it's something near and dear to my heart. I think we felt like there was a lot of momentum,
Yeah.
for a long time, and there's a lot of really, really great things about Chicago that make it a fantastic place to be able to continue to invest and thrive and build companies. And
Yeah. I think it's coming back around, and I think it will. And, everyone's still trying to find their footing when it comes to hybrid and in-person remote or in-person work versus remote. But that's a big part of it. And I think there's some people who've done it well and still maintain it. I was looking at this, and I mean, I know we call it out all the time, but like on the articles I pulled up around like top tech companies still, and like Sprout's still up there, Sprout Social's still on there, is like top 3, and they still have an office here, and they still do lots of events that around in person. And then, I mean, the other ones, which are funny, are like the huge companies. It's like Google, and it's like every other big company, like Salesforce and all that.
Google,
so,
Salesforce, yeah.
But there's some other ones too. I mean, like I'm not super familiar with all of the companies that came up on it, but there was, up and coming ish, I think, because some of them like were up, Upwork has an office here, but, Lever, Paylocity, ServiceNow is here. That's a big one.
Yep.
Jellyvision's still on there. Like Jellyvision's OG. So yeah, there's like still stuff.
Paylocity too.
Yeah, Paylocity's on there too. Yeah.
Career Builder was big. Yeah, but there's always been that, like, it's always been a little fragmented too. Like Redbox was really big. Like Braintree came out of Chicago.
Yep.
Brian Johnson guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot that I think, I don't know. It's just like, I don't think there's, I don't know what it takes. I don't know. It's like, we just haven't had an absolute superstar success company as, successful as Sprout and Groupon and ServiceNow and some of those companies are. Like, maybe it's just not like just the absolute grand slam type of outcome or something. And that, we don't need to get into all that, but obviously like equity structures and, the amount of people who do well and then stay in the area after they do well and start to found their own companies and invest and write angel checks and all that stuff. Like, I think that takes a few times through that loop to really be able to like gain that momentum. And I don't think that's something that we've been able to accomplish in Chicago in particular. But shifting gears quite hard, back into what we do a little more specifically. We wanted to talk about like the growing importance of design. So, in some ways, this felt like a sub bullet of the AEO conversation, and it certainly does tie to it. But a lot of factors and through our discussion felt like it was meaningful to be its own talking point. And like, we've really focused on organic growth in the last couple of years as sort of positioning and just kind of where we're focused. And obviously having the word organic in it probably does still get heavily conflated with just being SEO.
Yes. I wanted to say 100%, but it's probably not that, but it's like 9 times out of 10.
And that's fine, because that's still been the core of what we've done. But like, really, all things non-paid. And so thinking about how SEO and now AEO and PR and social and email and podcasts and all of this works together for a company. So again, just kind of everything non-paid.
Yeah.
And so we recently brought on like full-time design lead at 10 Speed, which was a desire for a while and something that we've seen as really, maybe force multiplier would be a way to put it. Like, there's a lot of great stuff we do, and we can do more for clients. but just generally see the through line in, everything I just talked about, that design does become, a bigger and bigger piece to that. And
Yeah.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, as companies or whatever, thinking about the structure of their marketing teams and where they're investing, and even just how they're kind of approaching the next phase of what marketing is and channels they're focusing on, and just talking about design.
I think it's interesting because it is a sub bullet of the AEO stuff, but it's like less directly an answer to like how can you make sure that you get surfaced in those things.
Right.
And not to bring it all back to that. It's just more like, right now everyone's so fixated on LLM optimization and all that like I think this actually does kind of get lost in the mix, even though it's still so important because it fuels all the other things that we already kind of talked about, which is, first party data visualizations and, making sure that you're distributing content properly, right? And effectively, and if you are, and you're putting your best foot forward, you should probably have some visualization or design or graphic or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn carousels and all that type of stuff. But then ultimately those things then get, if it's an owned or like compelling visual that can be used and repurposed and cited and all that. So like, I think it's tremendously important. And the quality is important. And I know that, related AI has also probably helped enable a lot of people to create more images, create a lot more imagery nowadays than before, but, you still see a ton of content out there that doesn't have anything. So, it's something that people should be investing in.
Yeah.
And thinking and making it a priority when it comes to the content they create.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's, the AI image generation is an interesting point because I think that, currently there's still a good amount that you can tell like, oh, that was generated by AI.
Yeah.
I think that gap is closing rapidly and will certainly shift over time. But I don't think that like I'm not seeing this world where like all of a sudden all design is great and beautiful.
No.
Just because AI exists. Like taste matters. And like just generally having an eye for design and production quality and just a lot of different things that matter. And so, I think like we've certainly believed in, from our time at Sprout, like having great design, like it is a huge, it helps up level everything you're doing from a marketing and brand perspective. Like, and so I think that that's going to continue to be the case. Like you said, driving more engagement or, whatever it may be, that's going to matter. And like, so I think that the big thing there is like, I guess kind of figuring out the investment, because sure, AI, you could, ask Canva or ChatGPT or anything to like generate this image for you. But what does that mean to be cohesive and have someone sort of steward the brand and have consistency and all that stuff throughout? Because I think the reality is that, similar to what I said about like, this is all, in my opinion, positive because it just shifts people to being better companies, like better product and all that stuff that will require for the AEO side of things. I think design is also a component that can just be a huge differentiator, in an area that requires investment.
Yeah. And, it's something that you can use like, again, get started with like some design through AI to start to get you going. But no matter what, at some point, like the things you're pointing out when it comes to like quality, or taste or just consistency, like there's going to be a person involved in that at some point. So like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, I don't want to be tone deaf to say that like you can't create great stuff with that, but like it's about just making sure that you're investing and how you invest in that is going to be really critical moving forward. I think the exciting thing about it is just that, like, if I think about it from me, like my perspective as like a marketer earlier on when I was like really getting started with SEO, like if I had AI at that time, I mean, I would be using it constantly to make imagery if I didn't have the resources available to me.
Yep.
That's, I think, at least the exciting thing, which I still haven't seen out there. Like I've seen like some featured images on like a blog post that you can tell are AI. I see it more in publications now. You can tell, it feels like it. Like, you know, their caricaturized visualization of like whatever the topic is totally AI.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's actually really good that I'm sure that a designer leveraged AI to do that. It's not like they just like had an intern in the newsroom or something, like going like, hey, can you make that?
Yeah.
So either way, it still made the content better. And I think that it's still going to be important that we use design and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm, I guess, pro AI helping designers.
Yeah.
Just like AI helps marketers, and not, the narrative that designers aren't needed because AI can do it. I think
totally.
But yeah, in general, I just wanted to make sure we had time to talk about that, because I think that for any B2B marketing company, I think that really becomes a huge differentiating factor as you think about going across multiple channels, and it's not just text on the page, rank in organic search, they click through and
yeah.
Yeah.
And to your point, a huge differentiator. I mean, specifically in, I think there's more technical products that are coming out, and more AI focused products are coming out. We work with a lot of them. One of them, for example, I won't name them, but like they handle a lot of it on their own from a design perspective. All of it. But they do a really great job at it. That's like just something they don't need that help with, but we help with the writing and the creation of the content, but they flesh out every piece of content with like supplement or complementary visualizations and everything. It's really, really great. And it could be charts, or it could be, a creative visualization of some concept, right? Because it's more technical in nature, diagrams, all that.
Yeah.
I think it absolutely sets them apart from their competition, because they've been growing over the past 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think in those spaces too, technical spaces, all that, it's going to be even more important.
Yeah.
No one just wants to read a wall of text within the world of like content marketing, or like if you're educating someone through something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different if it's a book. A lot of books don't have pictures.
Yeah.
Although those are my favorite kind.
Graphic novels.
Yeah.
Yes.
Specifically.
Cool. Well, I think the last thing we had on the agenda, any more on designs?
No, I think we made that clear.
So, I mean, I think the last interesting thing, we've talked about social as being a big part of that. Just the kind of what's happening, not to say happened, but still happening on LinkedIn. So, I mean, I found a study from originality.ai, and they studied thousands of posts and found that they found that 54% of posts over 100 words on LinkedIn were likely generated by AI.
Yeah.
And then they also found that since 2022, so really kind of when ChatGPT started to get into everyone's hands, the length of LinkedIn posts has grown by 107%. And as a result, those posts receive 45% less engagement. So,
what are we doing here?
Yeah, there's a lot of terms lately, slop and like some different things, kind of just talking about the noise on the internet. And it is very interesting, because I think that LinkedIn still holds a very powerful, unique place, especially for B2B companies.
Yeah.
But, I think what really even more, I understand the writing side to some extent, especially if you're kind of having it prompt ideas or, help you write. Feels different than like just fully cranking out a ton of posts.
Yeah.
But even more than that is the like the rise in like AI commenting,
Right.
where it's just running out because there's no limit on commenting, I mean posting either, but like versus like making connection requests and that kind of stuff. Like you can kind of get limited. They do that.
Yeah.
So that to me feels like when it's not just posting, like clearly people can tell to some extent, or it's just worse or whatever, like they're just getting less engagement on those posts.
Right.
But like when you talk about the commenting side of it, and all of a sudden you have like AI commenting on posts that were generated by AI,
Yeah.
then like, yeah, what are we doing here? I think is your succinct
I mean,
way to put it.
Yeah. It seems like it's turning into like, it's basically like email at this point, where like email to some extent is just, it's mostly noise. And, obviously we use email and to communicate with in a variety of ways, but yeah, I don't know. I was trying to do some like digging on where this is all going, because LinkedIn, I used to feel like LinkedIn was actually the only platform at one point that had a purpose, because it is like, it was like, oh, for professionals, and like, it's a good place to get your name out there and build your brand and all that. Because like at one point, obviously Facebook went one way, and there's just the traditional quote unquote social networks. They just are just kind of Wild West. And so like, I wouldn't say LinkedIn is Wild West now. It's all still like this professional, sandbox, I guess, where people can, put their best foot forward in building a brand, and hopefully maybe, I guess, recruiters will see it, or we can build a company's brand. I mean, we use it. I shouldn't talk. I'm not the best to post on LinkedIn, but it's just, it's, I don't know. I feel like the clock is ticking on it. In another ironic, I guess, note, I actually went to ChatGPT and I was like, I'd used the search functionality of it to like ask it to like give me like a breakdown of like the sentiment of LinkedIn these days, and it was just like all negative, and it cited a bunch of things, and also then gave me a bunch of alternatives, like because I was like, where's this going, and like what's the next alternative? And there are starting to be discussions around like that. I think people will eventually move away from LinkedIn. It's just been spammed so much now that if it's AI posts and AI comments, at some point people are going to walk away from it. So it's just like, what is the purpose of it? But I guess to put a point on it is that I think that people are going to start reaching, and I think they already are, for more like very specialized, specific communities.
Yes.
In order to actually do the thing that LinkedIn was supposed to do. And then LinkedIn is just like it's a checkbox.
Totally. Yeah. And that's what I was gonna say, is I think that it reminds me of, you remember how like Craigslist existed, and then like startups were built under like every subcategory of Craigslist, basically. Like, LinkedIn had groups. Yeah. Which was supposed to be kind of that sub affinity, like, yeah, you're on LinkedIn, but like you get in groups that are more targeted. Yeah. And those just slowly dwindled and fell off. And so I agree. I think Slack communities, I mean, some of those Slack communities are
still
massive.
Yeah, like, they seem to be, they still have legs, it seems like.
Yeah. And then that's a whole other discussion for another time on like that. They seem like, some of them seem to get, I don't know what the magic number is, but after they get over this size, then they just get like, really, really, it's just the same few people posting, and nothing really happens and whatnot. But even Reddit, like Reddit has this like roller coaster of like what I feel like to have as a reputation, where like people love it, hate it. Sometimes everyone's talking about it, like that's where I get all my information. It also has this like influence in the things we've talked about today, apparently, like LLMs and stuff like that. Potentially, it's a whole other subject, but like those have communities, and brands have communities on there. We were like talking about this a few weeks ago. Yep. But yeah, there's like, I think just more authentic places that you can probably get you can accomplish the thing that you want to accomplish. Yeah.
And that's a bummer.
No, I'm not. I don't think it's all is lost. Like, it's a big company. That's their golden goose. They're gonna
Yeah.
try to figure it out. I will say the last couple times I've gone on LinkedIn, just like that main feed has been like, oh, that the very first person was like someone I would want to see their post. And then I scroll and like, oh, them too. Oh, them, like they seem to almost be like figuring out some algorithmic tweaks that are making some of that better, which I think can then like there's authentic connection and therefore authentic engagement, and maybe they're figuring out some of that like suppression of that. I mean, they have to figure that out in one way or another,
Right.
I'm sure, because left unchecked, it would certainly just ruin it. But it's interesting because it's I have no issue with any like executives that have people write for them, kind of like help ghostwrite, because at the end of the day, like there's collaboration there. It's their ideas, they're informing it. Like there's good stuff there. And I think if you use AI in the same way, that it's a support tool.
Yeah.
I am fully on board with that. That is not the issue. It's just the people who seem to figure out how to hack and get ahead of like, this is the formula, this is the template, AI is going to crank these out for me.
Yeah.
That makes it discouraging for anyone who is sort of authentically wanting to just like speak, and I think David C. Baker is great at talking about like just being yourself and just, writing the way you talk and, all that stuff. And so I think there's positivity there. It's just a matter of like, how do we get the continue to have like authentic things come through and be valuable.
I think that's the take, like at least one of the takeaways for me is like it's going back to what was originally the, like, I guess best parts of content marketing and even organic content marketing and SEO, which was like provide something resourceful. That's what you should be doing anytime you're writing anyway, especially for your audience. So like, I think there's a lot of people doing that, but then most of the time it's like wrapped in a promotion, like follow me to get this thing or that. And it's just like, I get it. Like everyone needs to build something, but I don't know. It's just turning into this never ending, like follow me, subscribe, etc. And I just, at some point, like we're just building this thing that people are just going to walk away from. I think it's good for you to, I think the tip I'd give to like brands that we would advise to like repurpose their content is like to try to make that as authentic as possible.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's going to be hard to validate or justify investing in, like you should spend a lot of time building your brand on LinkedIn. If everything ends in a promotional CTA, it's going to be tough. That's not to say you shouldn't try things and test them out, but I think that that's the key. It's like probably just try a bunch of different things and not just be full-fledged like, hey, this is a marketing message.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
Awesome. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's the end of session 1. Thank you for checking it out. Please like and subscribe, and visit 10speed.io for more information about what we do. Thanks.
Thank you.